I think when you find out later in life, especially having been a filmmaker for the best part of my adult life, it makes a lot of sense. First of all, because you realise why you do what you do. So sort of my whole life I've been sort of self-employed, and I've been a writer, director, and all those sort of things. Kind of when you think about it, are all about being your own boss and being in control. And all these sort of things which, you know, when you reflect on that, you think, okay, that makes a lot of sense now. So it hasn't changed the way I do things as such, other than just understanding why I do things the way I do, if that makes sense. I think one of the benefits of being a writer-director is that you're effectively the boss. So it does mean that you kind of get to define the way that you work. And I work much better one-on-one or one and a few people. I find it very overwhelming as an autistic individual to be, you know, in situations where I'm with a lot of people, for example. So I have made some adjustments like that. And I think that's an adjustment you can make. But I guess if you're a filmmaker in other positions, that might be more challenging. You know, if you were in another department, that might be harder to kind of define the best way that you can work like that. But I think the film's all about communication. It doesn't matter how you communicate; it's just as long as you do communicate. I think film, like the film industry, television industry, just like general society and business and everybody else, I think they just need to understand that. Neurodiverse individuals are just another component of humanity as such. You know, it's a huge community of people, and we've all got different things to offer, and we all have our challenges, and we're all good at certain things as well. It just, you know, so I think it's about recognizing the strengths of people who are neurodivergent, and obviously recognizing also that comes in all shapes and sizes as well. So first of all, removing the word disability from conversations is a big step that I think the industry can do, because you can be neurodiverse and fully able. Equally, you could be neurotypical and disabled. So I think, you know, we have to sort of like learn some new ways to look at the status of people and just accept people for who they are more, and not necessarily put a label on, but recognize that they may have needs. So the nature of collaboration and neurodivergence could seem like contrary things, but actually you can be collaborative with one person, or you could be collaborative with two people. Obviously it gets harder if you're dealing with lots and lots of people, and it can feel overwhelming if you're surrounded. So it's about creating the right space for yourself and the right conditions, and for other people to kind of recognize that as well. You know, doing things like having individual briefings with people rather than having big team briefings might be one way for people to kind of navigate that sort of difficult area. I think, first of all, autistic people tend to have a tremendous focus. Certainly, I would never have been able to make 4 feature films when I reflect on it if I hadn't have been neurodivergent. I don't think. I've been like really single-minded, and obviously you hear the word no a lot in the film industry, but you know, I've always been like just super focused on getting things off the ground, getting them done, and I've had really my head buried in it. And I think it's quite difficult for people like your loved ones and your friends and all the rest of it, because you kind of cut yourself off and you're just completely in service of it. But I think, you know, that kind of hyper-focus can be embraced, because it means that you can be trusted to deliver something. And I think that's a huge benefit for any producer or film company. I think the first steps when we're considering either casting or crewing up, particularly if we're considering employing neurodivergent individuals, is making sure that everybody is aware of that and the kind of conditions that would suit someone who is neurodivergent. I sort of believe that like a film set is like a microcosm of society, and you can you can kind of find a ways to meet people in the middle. So like as if you're the rest of the crew and you're dealing with someone who's neurodivergent, you can understand that that person might need extra time and space to process things. And I think, you know, even that can be hugely beneficial to someone, so that they don't feel like overwhelmed or too much pressure. Just giving space to people to express themselves in all their forms. I think the first steps when we're considering either casting or crewing up, particularly if we're considering employing neurodivergent individuals, is making sure that everybody is aware of that and the kind of conditions that would suit someone who is neurodivergent. I sort of believe that like a film set is like a microcosm of society, and you can kind of find a ways to meet people in the middle. So like as if you're the rest of the crew and you're dealing with someone who's neurodivergent, you can understand that that person might need extra time and space to process things. And I think, you know, even that can be hugely beneficial to someone, so that they don't feel like overwhelmed or too much pressure. Just giving space to people to express themselves in all their forms. When I was diagnosed, and once you're diagnosed, you kind of go through this process of, go through this roller coaster of thinking, you know, who am I and what am I, and oh, this means that, and this means that, and this is why I did this, and all the rest of it. And then once you're out the other side of that, you can kind of be yourself and kind of like make your peace with it. And I found that I wanted to start telling stories with a sort of with a voice. You know, I've always, you know, you always think you've got a voice, but actually, as a creative, you sort of you come at it from a perspective. And this has now sort of enabled me to come at it from an autistic perspective. So all this work kind of tumbled out of me over the last year. Short films, long films, everything, you know, conversations, interviews, everything. And it was really exciting because it was literally like being let out. It was really fun. So my sort of plan was just to see what happened. So I wrote a short film and I wrote a feature film as well. And so the short film's made. We're just sort of finishing that off, and the feature film's in the first stages of, it's all written, now got a producer on board, so that's hopefully moving forward very soon. So huge surge of energy as a result of this sort of diagnosis. Feels like the gloves are off. So as part of the process of like trying to understand about who you are all over again when you're diagnosed, one of the things that I analysed was like how am I able to teach, for example. And teaching is like quite performance-led in the sense that you can walk into a room and you can energise and you can motivate people. And that's very distinct and different from what I might find terrifying. Like, for example, if you put me in a pub with 5 or 6 people and I have to make small talk, I just would not know where to start, and I would feel anxious and difficult and all those sorts of things, and I would go to pieces very quickly. You put me in front of a class of say 100 students and I could motivate them for 2 or 3 hours. You know, I could make them come away feeling excited about film, and it's because it's more sort of performance-led. So for me, there's a degree of, like, again, focus on the work, focus on what you're teaching. So I think that, if anything, I've realised that's a real strength and that I can lean into it even more. And also, I've started to talk about it quite openly with students, and I've been really surprised at the warm and the just how much connection has come out of it. I think with all students, they kind of always wonder who their tutors are, and there's always a sort of a barrier. And if you allow something personal like that to sort of come into the frame, then there's an extra level of trust that comes in, where they kind of feel like, oh, that's quite honest and authentic. So I think that's okay to do that. And I will be honest and say, I feel a responsibility to kind of talk about it openly now, because I don't want students to feel like that maybe if they're undiagnosed, for example, that it could be a barrier and they feel scared about sort of, you know, revealing or seeking diagnosis or whatever. So you feel like you have a responsibility like that as a tutor, especially to kind of make people feel like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So I think even before I was diagnosed, obviously my son, who's now 9 years old, he was diagnosed when he was 4 years old. So I've lived with autism for about 5 years now. And obviously there's a huge discovery that comes with that. I think it's important to say that every single neurodivergent person is different and unique to themselves. There are some sort of very common traits, for example. And so I think the more knowledge you have, the more compassionate you can be. And I think working with neurodivergent students, one example might be giving them the time and the space to process information, but also the opportunity to repeat information and to make that information available in lots of different ways. So in a classroom setting, it might be overwhelming or difficult to retain or to process the information. So it's like saying to a student, would you like a follow-up? Would you like to have a private session? Would you like to have additional information? You know, would you like to chat about it afterwards or whatever? So it's giving that student that additional time, that additional space and resources to be able to, you know, process things in their own way. But it's even even in communication. For example, you know, if I knew someone was neurodivergent in the class, I wouldn't put them on the spot, for example. I wouldn't say, you know, I don't know, what's the meaning of the word auteur, because that would immediately cause that person some anxiety, and I wouldn't want to do that. I would always offer it out, and then if that person wants to answer, they can do. So I think little adjustments like that are sort of quite beneficial and inclusive. So in terms of improvement, I think with inclusivity of neurodivergent students, I think the important thing is right from day one is kind of setting up LFA as a safe space, so that the moment a student, you know, in induction week, as soon as they come in, they know that this is a safe space, that there is a kind of setup here, but also an ethos that they can express themselves for who they are. And that's very, very important, because it could be up until now in their lives, they may have faced a lot of barriers. It's very common for people growing up to have people, you know, sort of say, you can't do this, you can't do, why are you being like this, or whatever. And we have to create an environment for them where they feel really relaxed and comfortable and they can be themselves. And also that, you know, for those of them who may not be diagnosed or going through diagnosis as well, to be able to have a dialogue with any member of staff about how they're feeling, and, you know, just keeping that alive. So I think neurodivergent people have so much to offer as filmmakers, but we do have to give them the environment to be able to flourish. So I think from day one, talk about that, make sure that students know it, and then just follow that through all the way through, and just create that environment. And it's not just about that student either, it's about everyone around knowing as well. So the more we can educate everybody else as well, then we can help sort of nurture that environment.